Welcome to the Healthcare Provider Happy Hour. This is a safe space where we invite healthcare providers to unapologetically be themselves after the working day. My name is Jennifer George, and each week I will connect you with guests and stories that will help transform your stress to success and fulfillment. Are you with me? Grab your drink of choice and let's chat. Hey everyone, welcome to the Healthcare Provider Happy Hour. I'm your host, Jennifer George, and I'm joining you today with Crystal McAfee. Crystal is the president of the Crohn's and Colitis Canada Peel chapter. She herself has IBD and is here to share her story, her journey towards empowerment and advocacy. And I welcome her today, and I think you'll really enjoy this episode and learn not only about Crystal, but about how we as healthcare providers can show up and support those managing chronic conditions day to day in the best way possible. So grab your drink of choice and join us. Welcome, Crystal.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'm happy that you're here. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm very excited. This is my first podcast.
Oh my God. Well, I'm so excited to have you here. Like, you're so eloquently spoken. You're on social media. You write beautifully. You're super inspiring. So it's hard to believe it's your first one. I'm sure it won't be your last. But I'm glad you're here today. I wanted to chat with you just about you, your story, your journey. And I know you're a strong advocate for the IBD community and how you've come into this evolution, basically, and how that's going and how you continue to evolve that way. I had the opportunity to chat with Crohn's and Colitis a couple of times, and just a great community. I felt like so welcomed by everybody, and I didn't hesitate to reach out to you, although I was a little shy about it, but I didn't hesitate to reach out to you once I got to know you a little bit. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, Crohn's and Colitis Canada is an amazing community of support. I've found them to be truly wonderful from the top down.
Yes.
Very rarely do you see an organization where people are so committed to a purpose and a mission. And you feel that from Lori, who's our CEO, all the way through national office, through the DCs, through our field people, and then the chapters. It's really about a shared purpose to find ways to support our IBD community, to advocate on their behalf, to empower them, and to support them in any way that we can. Because an IBD journey is very unique to the individual, and it can be very challenging, but having a community of support makes it a little bit easier. So that's really how we see our role.
Yeah, and it truly is how it is, like, super supportive, and I would, based on my own experiences, not of just people with IBD, but also just anybody coming in to offer support. Just everyone I've communicated with has been wonderful. So so it's, it speaks to the integrity of Crohn's and Colitis Canada. So tell me more about you first, though, Crystal. Tell me about who you are. What do you want us to know about you?
First and foremost, I will always define myself as a mother. I have two incredible sons who I wasn't supposed to be able to have, because apparently I'm sterile as a result of some medical procedures earlier in my life. But they are my heart and soul. But in terms of who I am outside of being a mom, I'm a Crohn's warrior of over 25 years, and I'm dedicated to raising awareness for our IBD community in the hopes of also decreasing stigma around it. For me, it's about creating the space to identify and to celebrate our IBD community, which is really vibrant, and to support them through advocacy, through awareness initiatives, and also to raise some money so we can find a cure. Because as someone who's had IBD for a very long time and has children, I can tell you that IBD is not the legacy I want to leave them.
Wow. May I ask, do your children have IBD as well, or?
They don't, as of yet, but my children are still young. They're 8 and 14,
Oh,
so they're still relatively young. There is the possibility that they may develop it. Obviously, that's a concern of mine. As a mother, you never want to see your children suffer, and I wouldn't want to see them live the life that I've lived.
mhm,
And so that's part of my driving force around what I see as my purpose.
mhm.
And my work with Crohn's and Colitis Canada has given me the opportunity to build a network of individuals who I can reach out to learn from, and we can work together to create awareness and hopefully help find a cure
Yeah.
for Crohn's.
That's beautiful. And just supporting the next generation, not assuming, your children will get it. But I think as a mother, and I'm not a mother, so I could be wrong, but, you just want the best for your children regardless,
Absolutely.
right? And like you said, little suffering as much as possible in
Absolutely.
life. So can you tell me more about your journey, like your story leading up to your diagnosis? I know that it's been many years since you were diagnosed, and just kind of to where you are today and in this moment right now.
So that covers roughly 34 years. So I'll try to be as
Okay, so it's
succinct
more than
as
I
I
thought.
possibly can. 30, oh, sadly 35. Apparently I can't do math.
Time
Um,
is flying.
Time does fly, yes.
Yeah.
So initially I became ill around the age of 10. In those days, being young, I didn't have the vocabulary to really describe what was happening to me. So when I presented to the pediatrician, it was stomach pain, diarrhea, pain associated with eating,
Mm.
and being tired. I didn't have the word fatigue, but that would have been the more correct term. I remember being a kid and watching the other children at recess, and they'd be able to just run for like 15 minutes, or they were playing soccer or skipping or what have you, and they could just go all out for 15 minutes. And I would watch them in awe because
Yeah.
there was no way that I could do that. I would need a nap halfway through.
Oh, really?
So I knew something was
Wow.
different about me, and the fact that I had so much difficulty around food. I would watch other kids and they could eat whatever they wanted, and I would look and say, well, if I ate that, I'd be in the bathroom in 5 minutes.
Wow.
Right? So I knew something was wrong. Anyways, so I presented with these symptoms as well as abdominal pain and bleeding and whatnot for 9 years to my pediatrician. And he initially chalked it up to the fact that I was an overachiever. I was a very hardworking student, and I really, my sense of identity was very much defined by my ability to perform academically. And so he simply thought it was stress. I was putting too
Right.
much stress on myself, and that's why I was having these stomach issues. And later, as a parent, I learned that it's not uncommon for kids when they're feeling stressed or nervous to say they have stomach pain. So it wasn't an unreasonable assumption for him to have made at the time. But the fact that it had gone on as long as it did, and so over the course of 9 years, I received various, I guess, what we would now deem as misdiagnoses, whether it was a nervous stomach, ulcers. Like I was diagnosed with ulcers by the time I was 11. Yeah,
Crystal, can I interrupt you for a moment though?
yes.
So did your parents, your mom or your dad, did they know something? Did they believe you in terms of your symptoms? Did they know that this was uncharacteristic for a child to have these difficulties? Or like, I was
I
wondering if you
believe,
had that support there.
yeah, that's a difficult question. I would love
Okay.
to say that I think they believed me to a certain extent, but they also were raised with this notion that doctors were infallible. So if the
Yeah,
doctor had
definitely.
said she's just a nervous child, I think it was reasonable for them in that time frame, because now we're talking about the early 80s. You know,
You don't need to put a number to it. It's okay. But yeah, no, I see what you're saying. That
it
time.
was a reasonable assumption. And I think it's common in that generation, and I still see it today, where they see the doctor's opinion as holy. and they don't question it. So, did they know something was wrong? Yes.
Okay.
Did they believe that what the doctor said? Yes. And I don't for a moment think that there was any, anything malicious there, or that they didn't want to see it. I just think that they believed what the doctor had said.
Right. Yeah, because you
So
obviously kept going. I mean, over the course of 9 years, you were going back and forth. So I guess that's what I was wondering, because I'm like, it must have been your parents that were advocating as well, and trying to get some answers with you. Yeah.
Absolutely. So ultimately, that 9-year period, I felt like my feelings, my experiences weren't being validated. It really left me questioning my own mental health, to be honest with you, because I don't know if doctors always appreciate how profoundly their words and actions impact their patients, because we do hold doctors to such high esteem. And so, if a doctor suggests to you that something may just be in your head, you start to believe them.
Mm-hmm.
And that leaves you questioning what your own experience is. And so over time, I simply stopped going to the doctor, because it was the same symptoms over and over again. And it was funny, because I remember one of the last times I saw him, again, I was complaining about pain in my lower abdomen. And he said, "Crystal, you've been telling me you've had pain there for years."
Yeah.
And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Doesn't that strike you as suspicious?" And I said, "No, because you've done nothing to address it."
Good.
But what I took away from that is he didn't believe I was ill. So then I simply stopped going, because I didn't see any hope for a diagnosis. And then eventually the situation grew more serious, and he diagnosed me. I did go back, and he diagnosed me with a peptic ulcer. And I took the medication for a peptic ulcer, which exacerbated my condition very rapidly and significantly, to the point where I lost 30 pounds in just over 3 weeks. My body stopped absorbing food and water. I couldn't tolerate anything. I went from having occasional pain to chronic pain, rectal bleeding that was alarming. And I remember going into him and saying, "Do you really think this is in my head? Do you think I'm making this happen? Because I can assure you, I don't want to live like this."
Mm-hmm.
And that was the last conversation I had with him when I took my file and I went to see another physician who my aunt had actually advocated for me. It was her doctor. And she said, "Please, you have to see my niece. She's dying." And from my family's perspective, I was dying. And he agreed to see me. And after reviewing the test results and a physical exam, he said, I believe you have IBD.
Wow.
I said, "I don't even know what that is." And he said, "Well, good news for you. And my brother-in-law is a GI." I said, "Okay." So while I was sitting there, he calls his brother-in-law and says, "I need you to see her." The following morning, I went to see his brother-in-law, Dr. Wong, who I will tell you saved my life.
Yeah.
Ordered an emergency colonoscopy, which was performed the following morning. And then, so within 48 hours of speaking to Dr. Chu, I had gotten a GI, had an emergency colonoscopy, and had a diagnosis for the first time in 9 years.
I was going to say 9 years. Like, I don't think it's easy to look back and think 9 years, but like 9 years of feeling the way you felt and not getting any answers must have been really like frustrating and exhausting and depressing.
It was, and it was frightening, to be honest with you, because this idea that it was in my head,
Mm-hmm.
I knew it. I knew it wasn't. I knew my pain was real. I knew rectal bleed. Like, I can't manifest blood.
Right. I was just going to say, like, you're bleeding even, right?
Yeah.
Like,
but it really made me question my own sanity at times. And I would have pain and think, is this real, or do I think it's real?
wow.
And that's a very scary place to be, especially as a young person in your formative years.
Exactly. And I was just going to say that. And I was going to say, like, how much I applaud you for taking your file. Like, I mean, for you to have the courage after going through all of that to say, you know what, I'm changed. Like, I need a different opinion. I've got to switch it up. It's, Like,
it felt very serious to me. At that point, I
yeah,
was starting to question how long I was going to be able to hold on when your body stops, when you can't eat anymore, when you can't drink water anymore. That was very frightening for me. And also, there was this odd sensation, and other people, I've talked to a few other people who were severely ill with Crohn's who've had a similar experience where your body starts to quiet. And we don't recognize how loud our bodily systems are until things start to quiet and you realize that's not right. You
that is
know?
so interesting. That's
It
so
was a
true.
it's an eerie experience to be in your body and think something's not right. It's not loud enough in here
Wow.
because we don't think about how loud our bodies are. We've just grown
No.
accustomed to the noise level.
Hmm.
And yet, when things quiet, that was actually one of the most startling pieces for me. Like that's not right.
Wow. Well, that was kind of, well, I didn't get that specific sense, but the sense I got when you said, I'm taking my file and I'm going, was that it was like it was like your last bit of hope, right? Like it was like, I have nothing, I've nowhere else to turn. I have no
Absolutely.
other solution. So I'm going to just try something else. Wow.
I in the moment I felt like it was the last, yeah, it was a last ditch effort to find
Right.
help. Yeah.
Right. And then it was amazing how everything just kind of worked out from there.
Honestly, if it wasn't for my aunt, God rest her soul,
Yeah.
advocating on my behalf, I don't think that I would be here.
Now I can see why you're such a strong advocate too, and we'll get into that in a little bit. You've touched on it a little, but that's amazing. I wish a strong advocate for everyone, like at least one strong advocate, friend, family, just a trusted person. It could make a huge difference in someone's life. So, how did you, once you were diagnosed, what was your feeling at that time? Did you feel relief? Did you feel like, oh my goodness, now what? Like what was your thought at that point?
So initially, there was a sense of relief because finally there was a name to what I had been experiencing, and it was vindication that this wasn't all in my head.
Yeah.
Um, but the relief was rather short lived when I then found out it was incurable and lifelong, and so I
Mhm.
thought, okay, mixed bag here. But yeah, initially, absolutely, it was a relief to be able to put a name to something because, again, words have meaning, right? If you can name it, you can fight it.
Love
And
that.
so that was important to me, you know,
Yeah.
because I right from the beginning I had the sense that I'm going to fight this, whatever it is. I was determined to fight it and win because I'm stubborn.
So is that when is that when your moment of empowerment kind of kicked in? Like, did you start to take hold of the diagnosis and start to learn about it, or did you need time to just process it all?
Initially I needed some time. To
Yeah.
be honest with you, I remember at that point I had been hospitalized, and Dr. Wong comes in and he has these glossy brochures on this is what you have. And honestly, don't ever share those glossy brochures because they are a nightmare. Um,
Good to know.
I know they really are. Well, now I guess we don't even have them anymore because
Right.
everyone can access everything online.
Yeah.
But it was a little bit it was overwhelming to read through the glossy brochures of color pictures of all the terrible bruising and bleeding and all the things that were to come. And that was a little bit overwhelming. And I remember flipping the pages, going, okay, so this is what I'm going to fight and whatnot. And yeah, it was a little bit overwhelming. And that first night in hospital, I spent a lot of time crying, in particular because and I don't even know why I asked this because I was only 19 years old at the time. But I remember asking Dr. Wong, like, will I be able to have children?
Wow.
And he said, well, statistically speaking, that the numbers are not in your favor, but it is possible eventually you may. But statistically speaking, you may want. He was always a realist, and he's like, you're gonna have to wrap your mind around certain things, and you're going to have to wrap your mind around the fact that you will be a permanent patient from here on in, and you may not be able to go go back to university. You may not be able to hold down a job. You may not be able to have children. And those were really overwhelming messages to receive as a 19-year-old woman who felt like her life was just beginning. I had just started university, and I had hopes of a career and a family of my own. And so that was a little bit devastating. And I spent that night crying. And at one point I said, well, crying isn't going to do anything about this. This is what it is. I'm just going to have to deal with it. I'm going to make the best of it that I can.
Wow.
And so it was kind of the following day. I said, okay, so give me back those brochures and let me start reading it. Let me start understanding. And it really started the process of trying to come to grips with it. Mm-hmm. Because acceptance is, while acceptance is critical, it's very, very difficult to get to. And I think it's even more difficult to maintain because we're raised to believe that as a result of illness or injury, these are temporary matters. You will temporarily be ill or you're injured. If you break your arm, you'll be put in a cast in 6 to 8 weeks. You're going to have it removed. And yes, you're going to maybe have to work on it to get your muscle strength back, but there will be life after this. Whereas when you're diagnosed with a chronic, incurable illness, that's not the case. Mm-hmm. You can do everything right, but tomorrow you're still going to wake up sick. And that can be overwhelming.
How did you, because really, and like you just said, right, with chronic illness, it just doesn't go away, right? Even if there's remission, it just doesn't go away. And it's been so many years, right, that you've been experiencing this. I don't know enough about your story, but things could have gone both ways, right? It could have went to a dark area and it could have went toward, more wellness, right, that you would define, or more well-being. So, what was it like? What do you attribute? I don't know if the word success makes sense, but what do you attribute your well-being to right now? Like, what keeps you on the path of going that way, going towards wellness and staying well and empowerment?
So I'll be honest with you. I think everyone's journey includes both aspects of it. What drives me to move forward is I don't quit, but that is a personality characteristic of mine. And that applies to my health, that applied to, in school, it wasn't enough to be a good student. I had to be the number one student. I graduated from my MBA program, that's who I am. I don't quit. I work hard and often to my own detriment. But that's a personality characteristic. But at the end of the day, for me, what it came down to is I acknowledge that I may not have a long life, but I'm damn sure going to make the most of what I have. Mm. And that has really been the driving force. And I try to stay positive. And sometimes people have accused me of being overly positive and hopeful, but I've had my dark periods too. Everyone hits a point of utter exhaustion with chronic illness, with the physical demands of the illness, the mental health aspects of it. Everyone has their dark periods as well. But in terms of where I am today, I would say that it really comes down to, up until last year, I would have said there was 5 pieces to it. I've added an additional piece to this in the last year. But for me, remission was really a significant lifestyle change. The first one was around diet and nutrition. And it's funny because when I was first diagnosed, I remember talking to a nutritionist and saying, well, what does this mean in terms of what I can and cannot eat? And the advice that was given, and I believe is still given by some people today, is if it doesn't bother you, you can eat it. Which is such a funny thing to say.
So that's not true. You're just okay.
Well, and it's funny. It's a gut issue. So obviously what we consume will impact how we feel. Right. So, but for me, it's very much been a trial and error piece about what works for me, what doesn't. And that really started with keeping food diary. Nice. now I think they call it an elimination diet. We used to call it a low residue diet, and then we added. Anyways, you would add a new food, and for 72 hours afterwards, you would mark down how you felt about it. Did it improve your energy? Did it cause bloating? What have you? And so for years, I was keeping these journals to see how I felt about food. And as a result, I have a very clear picture in my mind of what I can and cannot tolerate, and I stick to that. My diet is based on whole foods. I can't say I don't ever, but I very rarely consume processed foods. And it's mainly, chicken and turkey and things that are easy to digest. Lately, I've had to add red meat into my diet because of anemia, which I don't have any, I'm not opposed to red meat. I don't have a moral issue there, what have you. It's just hard to digest. So
okay, gotcha.
not to eat it.
Yeah.
So I'd say first and foremost, it was diet. The second piece was identifying and addressing flare triggers. Because for everyone, it's a very unique experience. Some people are triggered by food. For me, what I came to realize is it was really based on emotional stress. And we're not talking about stress about, a deadline at work or school, but something that was deeply rooted in emotional stress. So for me, that meant I needed to train myself to stop ruminating on negative thoughts, and also cut toxic people out of my life. And that latter part is an ongoing process. It's not a one shot deal, unfortunately. And it's a difficult one because sometimes people who should be part of your tribe are actually hurting you. And so it can be difficult to cut those people out, but that has become an ongoing process in my life. Third piece for me was really about implementing holistic pieces to my own care. So visualization and mindfulness. And I consume huge quantities of probiotics and vitamins. And I and I know that the science, I always hear that, the science doesn't prove the probiotics work. And I understand that, but what I can say is anecdotally for me, they have been a game changer. So I'm a big proponent of those. And visualization, it's funny. It sounds silly, but for me, it was important I was one of those people who would go into colonoscopies and ask not to be fully sedated because I wanted to see the Crohn's disease. I wanted to see it. I needed to picture it in my mind because you can't fight what you can't see. And I wanted to see it, and I would visualize it getting smaller and like fight. And it sounds, Chris, I know, but
not at all.
Part of my healing process and mindfulness also, just to quiet the what ifs.
Yeah, that's so powerful.
Because our what ifs are scary, especially for at this stage of the game. Because I'm 34 years into illness, 25 years post diagnosis. Some of the really scary complications of IBD are statistically standing over my shoulder. So not focusing on that, mindfulness plays a big part in that for me. Also stress management, generally, I think learning to say no, because one thing I've noticed within our IBD communities, we are a bunch of type A personalities, and we think that we can do it all. And part of stress management and rest would be another really big component of this, is learning to say no. And that can be hard for us.
Yeah, a lot of healthcare providers are also very type A. And we try to do everything. We don't even take a pee break sometimes. You know what I'm saying? So we try to get it all done too. So we're all learning from you right now, because literally 1 to 5, I'm like remembering everything. I really do love all like this list, because it speaks to everything that I believe in as well. So,
and well, I think my last piece, which was the component that I added most recently, because I follow you on Instagram, I'm pretty sure is weight training. Resistance training is, and it's funny because it really started for me as a way to address bone loss. I have bone density issues because I developed Crohn's in my formative years, and so my bones didn't properly, I guess they didn't solidify. And then I spent 11 years on prednisone. And so that has a deleterious effect on bone density. And so we can't stop bone loss, but we can slow it. And so that's really where weight training came in. And somewhere along the way, it went from something I did to slow down bone loss, and I've come to love it.
Yeah, I've noticed that. And you're looking super strong.
Oh,
may I add?
Oh,
So
I really appreciate that. You can't imagine what that means to me.
Seriously.
Well, because as a sick kid turned sick adolescent turned sick adult, I never believed that it was possible for me to be strong.
Right.
I was raised to, well, everyone around me, and in the most loving way possible, not to be, not to limit me, but just to be loving and supportive. The messages were that you're fragile, you're weak, you need to be cared for. My name is Crystal, and it was kind of a metaphor for me that I could shatter and break. Yeah. And I internalized those messages. And so starting a weight training program from that perspective was utterly terrifying.
Wow.
At first. But I was very fortunate to find an incredible coach. And he has convinced me that I am much stronger and more capable than I ever imagined. And he's inspired me to see what I can do. So
I love the coaching component to the weight training. Yeah.
Absolutely. And having someone who really understands, and he is so patient with me.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's a good coach if he's patient. Yeah.
Well, and really he's tired of me telling this story, but he changed my life. In August of 2020, there was that brief period where gyms were open and we were training together. And one of the components of the workout that day he had designed was a tire flip. Those big,
yeah, they're massive. Yeah.
tires. And he said, okay, we're going to go flip the tire. And he's talking me through it. He's coaching. But from my perspective, it was kind of like a Peanuts. Remember the Peanuts cartoon when the adults spoke? That's all I heard, because in my head, I heard the voices of doctors and nurses past telling me, don't overexert yourself. You have 8.5 feet of scar tissue. You could bleed out. And my own voice in my head thinking, how far are we from a hospital? And could I get there in time?
Wow.
And at one point I look up and Andrew's looking at me. He's obviously looking like, what is she doing? All you have to do is pick up this tire.
Where did she go?
When you've zoned out,
yes,
at you, and you should say something. And I was so consumed with fear. Yeah. But I didn't want to say that, and I couldn't quite articulate everything that was going on in my head. And part of me is I didn't want him to know all the things going on in my head because I didn't want him to think I was crazy. So all I managed to get out was, if I can do this, it's going to be a huge victory for the girl who couldn't breathe on her own. Wow. And he looked at me and he uttered 5 words that changed my life. And he said, you aren't that girl anymore. And it was such a profound moment for me, because I had always seen myself as lesser and less capable. And part of me, that fighter component of me, had always fought to be seen as equal. And here's this guy who hasn't known me very long at all, who saw me for who I was standing in front of him, not my past. Right. And it was such a profound moment that I flipped that tire. And then I went on to do it 17 more times. And it was just this incredible moment for me. And that night, I'm going to tell you, I ugly cried on the drive home, because it never occurred to me that I could be strong. Wow. And that night I kept thinking about this and thinking about how it would have made a world of difference to me when I was laid up in a hospital, when I couldn't breathe on my own, when I was too weak to walk to the bathroom. So even though I was a teenager, I had a catheter. When I couldn't bathe on my own, when I wasn't even physically capable of turning over in my bed. And so nurses would have to come, and they had me perched on an egg crate and would have to come and turn me so I wouldn't have bed sores. It would have made a world of difference to that girl to know that one day you could be healthy again. One day you could be strong. having a role model would have made so many of the challenges I faced easier. But in those days, those of us with Crohn's didn't live to be in our late 40s and 50s. We died as a result of complications. The most common complication is actually colon cancer, right?
Right.
And so those role models weren't there. And so here I am laying in my bed thinking about this, again, ugly crying.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time ugly crying today. And it was at that moment that I actually emailed Crohn's and Colitis Canada and said, I want to be a volunteer. I want to do peer support. I want to do anything I can to support the kids that are laying in hospital beds right now, who
Crystal.
need to know that there is hope, because there's nothing worse than, the only thing worse than being chronically ill is feeling like there isn't hope.
I was just going to say, it sounded like nobody gave you hope when you needed it as a child, right?
Nope.
And I never knew that the story with your coach and everything, like this whole experience, is what propelled you then to start volunteering and advocating. Wow.
No, like that moment changed my life, because it gave me a clarity of purpose that I had lacked before. And previously I had a career that I was quite proud of and I enjoyed. And I took a step back from it when my children were born, because they're miracles. And, I've kind of felt like childhood is a limited time offer and work will always be there.
True.
And I did enjoy my work, but it wasn't my purpose. And it was really this tire flip that resulted in connecting with Crohn's and Colitis Canada that gave me that sense of purpose, that I was raised to believe that you're either part of the solution or part of the problem, right? Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I'm not a brilliant scientific mind that I can find a cure, and I'm not a brilliant doctor who can heal, but I'm a person with a lived experience, with a voice who can share a story. And if I can touch the heart of someone who's having a tough time, thinking that there is no hope for a good future with Crohn's, then I'm here to tell them there is, and not to give up, because in the darkness, and there's a lot of darkness that comes with chronic illness, it's very easy to give up, but there is hope.
Yeah.
Feeling.
It can make the biggest difference in someone's darkest moment. Just having that connection, or knowing that someone's there, that person being you in the community. So GutsyStrong.
Yeah.
Speaking of strong and strength, here we are today. Was that also inspired all around the same time? Your handle on Instagram?
It was.
Your account. Okay.
The moniker is something I hope to earn one day. Every time I'm in the gym, I'm like, I got to get a little bit stronger. I got to earn my moniker. Yeah. But GutsyStrong really came about because I wanted to create a space where we could celebrate IBD warriors. As we know, the internet can be a dark place sometimes, and there can be a lot of negativity. And so I thought it was important for us to create a space where IBD warriors could share their stories. We could celebrate their wins, but also have those difficult discussions that are really necessary for us to heal mentally from this. Because one of the shortcomings of the way IBD is traditionally treated is we treat it simply as a gut issue. And it's not, those in the IBD community, well, in the chronic illness, the autoimmune community, we suffer from higher levels of depression, anxiety, and suicidality than the standard population. And a lot of that is fueled by unresolved issues around medical trauma.
Okay.
But we don't talk about that. And our doctors typically don't talk about that, because let's face it, when you have a blockage, we got to deal with that blockage. When I was septic, we had to deal with that, not worry about what was going on in my head. But long term, we need to address the emotional aspects, the psychological impact that chronic disease and medical trauma have, because you can't be physically well if you're not mentally well. And from a patient's perspective, I know that for many years, I avoided the topic altogether. As a younger person, I avoided the topic because I was afraid of being stigmatized. In those days, this is prior to like the Bell Let's Talk days, and like right now, mental health is openly discussed, but that wasn't the case in the 80s and the 90s, sadly. So there was this desire not to be stigmatized, but the other piece was, those of us that are chronically ill, especially those of us who become chronically ill as children and adolescents, we have this sense of guilt, and we feel that we are a burden to our families. And so when we recognize that we are already a physical burden on our families, sometimes we're a financial burden on them because of the level of care that's required, the last thing we want to do is add to that burden by now saying, I'm also mentally requiring help too. And so it becomes very lonely, and we don't talk about it. And it was really actually only in the past year, I had the opportunity to listen to Dr. Dean Tripp, who is doing some amazing work out in Queen's University. And he was talking about depression and anxiety within the IBD community, and post-traumatic stress and whatnot. And it was only this past year, so now like 35 years into this journey, that I came to realize that a lot of what I've been experiencing is normal.
Wow.
And that was such an incredible weight that was lifted, because I think part of me, part of that experience of questioning your own mental health, am I really feeling what I'm feeling? And well, now I'm also having these other experiences that I know are not normal, and to hear him say, well, no, this is actually perfectly normal. You guys do actually experience this. Was again, like this life-changing moment. Like I literally had to turn off my camera, my Zoom, the recording, because I started to cry, right? Because it was such a relief to hear that I wasn't crazy.
It validated what you've been feeling this whole time, right?
Yeah, because a lot of us have a lot of trauma, and it comes up in the strangest ways. Like I had an experience last week, because I'm now having to monitor my blood sugar, and so I went to the pharmacy to pick up a blood sugar testing kit, and I'm talking to the pharmacist trying to figure out which is the right one to purchase for me. And in the corner of my eye, I see the PEG light box. Now, anyone who's had a colonoscopy can tell you that is colonoscopy prep. That box was 25, 30 feet away from me.
Wow.
I caught it in my peripheral vision, and I'm telling you, I could smell it and I could taste it.
Wow.
That's not normal.
Right. That's heightened. That's very much heightened senses there.
That's kind of odd, right? But these are the types of things that happen to us, and we think, oh, it's just, and it's normal for us to experience these things, but it's also a sign of trauma that we never talked about, we never had acknowledged. And so, when people talk about, what should I do when I'm newly diagnosed, and one of the first things I say is find a community of support, because there are things that we understand. As much as your friends and family love you and want to be supportive of you, we have shared experience, and we can validate that for you.
Yeah. And healthcare providers too, like a lot of us aren't going through or have experienced what you've experienced. So, we can provide our support, like you said, on the acute side of things or whatnot, right? But, it's very important for us though to also be mindful that likely when you're working with someone who's dealing with a chronic condition for many years, that there could be some trauma there. And I think it's just, we just have to start asking, and we have to start having the conversation. And if, people are open to sharing and want support in that way, knowing that it's there, because it is there. I do think it is there in some cases. I just think, like you said, that neither party is really saying it, right?
Absolutely.
We're aware of that, the better, because then we can actually initiate the conversation if it's too hard to otherwise, right?
Right, because a patient may not otherwise go down that road.
Right. And I know for me, like, because I work on an inpatient unit, in rehab, and sometimes I can be working with a patient. I'm fortunate because I get to spend time with people and I get to see them over the course of time, 5 days a week usually, and I get to know people. And sometimes those things come up later once a rapport is established, and trust is earned, and right. So and for me to be sensitive to that, like in the beginning anyway, and just recognize, like, I might have my own hunches, and I might have my own feelings there, based on what I pick up emotionally. But sometimes, like, I kind of try to respect the boundary as much as possible too, and try to meet people where they're at. But also, I
think the best thing is just to put it out there that I'm here to talk and I'm here to validate.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's really good for us to know. I know for me, like, just moving forward, I know, like, sometimes I'll say, I'm very, I don't want to say straightforward, but I pick up on things pretty quickly. So from the moment I walk into a room, I can tell right away if someone's feeling down, flat, or I'll just say, you're not yourself. And then, is something going on? And then usually something will come up from there. I'm very fortunate because I get to have those interactions. It's not in and out for me, right? But I don't think it takes, and it is amazing, but it also only takes a few seconds though to pick up on people's, just on what people are feeling, like the energy that people are carrying, whether it's, positive or negative for them at that time, right? Or, or just pretty flat for whatever reason, or indifferent. I've been working for a while now, so it could be from experience too, but I believe that the emotional piece is a big part of my patients' recovery. And I'm a physiotherapist, so it's a big part of the physical rehab and progress that they make. So I do a lot of talking with my patients too, not just movement.
That's amazing, because it can be difficult for patients to initiate those conversations because of, again, of fear of being stigmatized and whatnot. And also because sometimes, we've had experiences where we have tried to talk about our symptoms and they haven't been validated. And so you become hesitant to raise something because you're not sure if it's going to be acknowledged and accepted, or if it's going to be diminished and ignored. And that can be a scary thing, especially for an individual who's unsure to begin with, whether they want to talk about something. So if you then put something out there and it falls flat or on deaf ears, it just discourages you from doing it again.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing that you have that kind of rapport with your patients, because I think ultimately that's what patients want, is to feel connected, that we're a team.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. So what do you value in a trusted provider?
Yeah, and it's funny. This is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, because I'm actually, I need to find a new GI. And again, as I said, I'm 25 years into this. And so relapse and colon cancer statistics are alarming. And so I need to start building my team now, so that way when I need them, they're there. And so I have been giving this a lot of thought. And really what I feel that it boils down to is it's a relationship between a doctor and a patient. And like any relationship, it's based on trust. And trust comes from mutual respect and open communication. So for me, I want to know that I will be heard, not just listened to, but heard, if that makes sense.
There's a difference.
To say that I'm going to be heard, that my experience will be validated, my opinion will matter. So I'll be part of the decision-making process, as opposed to having something like a top-down approach to it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and also finding a physician who has a similar approach to things. Like for me, I will always gravitate towards a lifestyle change as opposed to a medication.
Right.
For instance, because that's what I value. That's who I am. But I know not all patients share that. Some people just, they have pain and they just want it to go away. And make it happen. Whereas I want to understand, well, where did it come from and how do we deal with it? I don't want to be popping pills. I did that for too many years. It damaged my poor liver.
Oh, yeah.
I had organ issues as a result of, we used to refer to as my drug cocktail, which was prednisone, Imuran with a Demerol chaser. Just, yeah, 11
That's
years
tough.
of
Like,
that
that's hard on
damages
the
your
body.
organs. It does.
Yeah.
It is. And
Yeah.
years of being on steroids can also, it does terrible things to your mood, let me tell you.
Yes, I've seen
So,
that. Yeah.
for me, I will always gravitate towards a more holistic approach. And, which is not to suggest that I'm against medications. I fully support them when they are absolutely necessary. I can tell you that steroids have saved my life.
Right.
Absolutely. I will never argue that point. And if it came to it, would I do it again? Absolutely. In a heartbeat. Because at the end of the day, I need to be able to function. I need to be as a person, as a mother. And what's more important to me is my quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
So if it comes down to it, I will absolutely go down that road. But if there's the option to do something more holistic, I will absolutely gravitate towards that first.
So would it also then be, just to paraphrase what you're saying, when you're identifying what you value in a provider, would you say it's someone who understands or at least acknowledges what you value as, as favored treatment approaches, if possible, right?
Absolutely.
If it's not a dire situation type thing, right? Or it's like,
Yes, yes, I'm not going to be, sucking on an onion hoping that that's going to
right.
Cure cancer. No. But, absolutely similar, an understanding that I bring value to the team.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to my body, my viewpoints need to be respected. But ultimately, it comes down to a matter of mutual respect and communication, I think.
Beautiful. What would you say? I hear this a lot. So what would you say? I have my own response, but what would you say to the person who says, Jen, I just want them to know what they're doing. I just want the surgeon, the doctor to know what they're doing. I don't care about their bedside manner. I don't care if they're a jerk. I don't care if they're arrogant. I don't care if they don't listen. I just want them to know what they're doing. How does that, after what you've just explained to me, do you have a response for that? Like being from a patient perspective, I would like to hear your thoughts on that, because
it's an interesting question. It's not one I've considered before. I would say it would be situationally dependent. So I have a heart attack. I want to know that surgeon knows what they're doing and can go in there, and I don't need to explain it to them.
It's like, again, an emergency situation.
And yes, at that point, I don't care whether you're a vegan, if you voted for the Green Party, if you drive a hybrid vehicle, just I want you to know what you're doing because you're cutting me open.
Right.
But when it comes to something like chronic care, I think it's a little bit different. I feel like we need to have a relationship. We need to have a common understanding, a common goal. We need to recognize that we're a team. And I want to feel connected to this person. I want to feel that my experiences are validated, that I'm heard, and that we're making decisions together. So, for me, it would be situationally dependent. Yeah.
Okay. That makes total sense to me, actually. Yeah, that's a great response. Great response. So if I wanted to be better tomorrow, I wanted to show up better to my patients tomorrow. Okay. What is one thing that you could suggest I do or be tomorrow when I meet with my patient first thing in the morning?
I have to tell you, I love this question.
Do you love this question?
I do, because so often as a patient, especially when you are a regular, you start to wonder if you're just a number. So it's so lovely to hear a doctor say, how do I show up better for you? Like that's beautiful. Yeah. And it's funny, I actually posed this question to a few people. I actually posted it on Instagram today.
Oh, did you?
I know what it means to me, but I thought,
yeah,
community speak to this. And overwhelmingly, there's two common pieces that kept coming up. The first was around timing of appointments and ensuring that there's a sufficient amount of time for us to talk about things thoroughly, because especially when patients are ill and they are on a lot of medication, we experience brain fog. And so I don't know if doctors necessarily know this, but we often come with a mental list. In my case, I used to actually write out my lists of these are all the things I needed to remember to say, because I knew when I was taking 32 pills a day, it was very easy for me to forget things.
Yeah.
So, and I would go to an appointment and I had 10 minutes and it felt like verbal diarrhea. Like I was just like, this is everything. And hopefully that, the doctor would be able to put the puzzle pieces together. Right. And so this concept of having a sufficient amount of time for us to discuss it. And then, because especially if you're having that brain fog, it's so frustrating. Like if I've waited 6, 8, 12 weeks to see my specialist and I only get 10 minutes of your time, and then I forget to mention something that I wanted to, that's an awful feeling. So that kept coming up is the time piece. And also the listen to understand, not to diagnose. So that kept coming up. And another piece was like, for me, it would be to see us holistically, that we're not simply, we're human beings. We're not just, a bundle of symptoms, and recognizing the important piece that mental health plays in terms of our overall wellness. And because you can't be physically well if you're not mentally well. So that piece, and really just about, approaching it as a team, that we're in this together, that we're not alone, because oftentimes those of us in that chronic illness community feel very much alone, and that's scary.
I love that. That's something I'm going to definitely just remember a lot of what you said. And I try to be mindful of most things. Certain situations like time, again, I'm fortunate compared to a lot of other therapists because I work in hospital. I do get time, but it never seems like enough time, Crystal. I'm going to be honest with you. If I have 45 minutes, I really believe that the quality of the interaction, like you basically said, is so important, and just taking the time. But I've had situations where I've had to spend way more time with one person, less time with another. And it's like I would do it for either person, right? It's just the nature of the need is so emergent sometimes that,
we understand that.
Totally. Yeah. And I find I find that patients are totally empathetic of that. I actually find patients are super empathetic of our time, of our busyness. They actually don't want to burden us. And sometimes and I always say, well, sometimes that kind of concerns me, because then sometimes I feel like you're not going to tell us everything. I don't want you to withhold from us either, or you take risks. In my case, some people getting up on their own if they're not yet ready to do that safely. So sometimes they put a risk on themselves that, because of those systematic issues, right? They kind of take it on for themselves. So just reminding them that, we're there seems to be helpful. And oftentimes I'll be down the hall and I'll see somebody needs something in their room. Like just those little touches I find make things flow a little bit easier for everybody too. And our floor is really good at doing that. So it all comes together. Before you go, what's your last piece of advice as a strong advocate yourself for people with chronic conditions, particularly IBD? What's your piece of advice for those who are managing, who are trying to stay the course, who are trying to stay inspired, who are, who could go either way? What do you have to share for them?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. A really important question.
Yeah.
And it's something that, we talk about within Crohn's and Colitis all the time, is how do we best support our community? And yeah, for me, it comes down to, it's not one piece of advice. The first piece would be to find your tribe. It's not And it may not be your family and your friends, but find that community of support, because you'll be surprised. Like, sometimes your greatest supporters are people you don't actually even know.
Amazing.
I get so much love over Instagram from people I don't even know. Where I haven't posted something in a couple of days, and they check in and say, "Are you okay? Are you having a flare? Do you need anything?"
Oh my God, that's beautiful. Yeah.
And so reach out to that community that is there to support you. Give yourself grace, recognizing that, yes, it's important to try to do your best any given day, but your best is going to be different. It's going to look different than your family, your friends, your cohort. It's going to look different than your best yesterday. And that's okay, because that's just part of the process. Taking the time to rest. This is one, it's funny because, again, we're type A personalities and we feel compelled to do it all. And we almost feel like we have something to prove because we're chronically ill. And sometimes that's often self-imposed, but there's also this notion that sometimes people will see you as inspirational because you are overcoming life with a chronic illness, and then that pressure to be inspirational drives you to sometimes to your detriment. And because it's okay to say no. Our able-bodied, healthy cohort doesn't feel compelled to do it all. We don't either, right? So take the time to rest. More than anything, reach out for the mental health help that you need. And I know I keep coming back to this. It's something that I feel so strongly about, because mental health is critical to overall health. We do suffer from depression and anxiety at high rates. We do have PTSD at a higher rate than the average population. And while that's normal for our population, we need to address it in order to really be well, holistically well.
Yeah.
And remember, you're not a burden. That's something that we all struggle with. I to this day, I feel that, like, there are times when I feel like, have I done enough for my kids? And my dad's like, you do more for your kids than able-bodied moms do for their kids. Just, you've done enough. But there's this notion of, am I enough? Am I a burden? And so recognize that you're not a burden. But I think my last thought would be, don't be afraid to dream, and in fact, dream big, because you're not your diagnosis. You are not statistics. And you will achieve your goals if you work towards them. And yes, progress is never linear. It's not going to be linear for able-bodied, fully healthy individuals. Our process may be slower and may have more setbacks, but you will achieve your goals if you choose to be unstoppable, but you have to be committed to doing that. And so that would be I think my overarching message is, there is hope, and you can not just survive IBD, but you can thrive with IBD.
Beautiful, Crystal. I'm just taking it all in. Seriously. It's so true. And I love that you just ended it with hope there. I think I think listening to this conversation, patients and providers alike, that I think the theme is definitely to hold on to hope through the dark times, and find support, connect, know you're worthy of all of it.
Absolutely.
Not compare yourself to others, and take extra care of yourself along the way. Thank you so much for being here. Where can people connect with you?
Oh, I'm very active on Instagram. I'm at GutsyStrong, and that's the best way to connect with me. And if we have listeners that have IBD and are looking to connect with other people in the community, I would highly, highly recommend you reach out to Crohn's and Colitis Canada. They can get you in contact with a local chapter, and it's just such a beautiful community of people, of support. And I found so much healing in that space. So reach out to Crohn's and Colitis Canada, because the chapters, that's what we're here for, and we would love to welcome everyone.
Love it. Thank you so much, Crystal, for being here. Maybe we can add then the website to Crohn's and Colitis Canada. Would that be okay?
That would be great.
Okay, yeah. So that people could link up. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm so glad you're here. You're such a delight. I literally could keep chatting with you, but I appreciate you and your spirit. And just keep shining your light and keep bringing people in. Like that's kind of what you're doing is you're creating this light for others to join and to know that there's support out there. So thank you.
That's my goal. So that means a lot to me. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Crystal. So we'll keep in touch.
Absolutely.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you.
So if you guys like this podcast, please subscribe and leave an honest review. Your feedback means everything to me. Your reviews are what moves this podcast forward, and I always appreciate receiving them. If you want to get a hold of me directly, reach out to me on social media. My handles are in the show notes, and you can always subscribe to my weekly newsletters at jennifergeorge.co so that we can stay connected. So until next time, thank you guys so much again for your ongoing support.